Hi everyone. For those of you who don't know me and are maybe new to these events, my name is Claire Brown. I'm the convener of the Young Professionals group at the Ulster Society, and you're so welcome today to our lunchtime session on time management. If you're anything like me and you're struggling in this hybrid world, I suppose, with team meetings, in-person meetings, constant interruptions popping up on your screen, then I'm sure you'll find something in this session for you today. I'm delighted to have with us Angus Farr. So Angus is also a chartered accountant, and he knows all too well the problems that we face as young professionals in the working environment. Angus delivers training like this all around the world, and we're so delighted to be welcoming him today to introduce us to some of the much needed time management skills that we can all benefit from. So just remember, as we are going through, to use the chat feature if there's any questions you want to ask throughout. We will host a short Q&A session at the end if Angus hasn't dealt with any of the questions as he goes through. Just a reminder, this is the first of a series of webinars that we're running, kindly sponsored by Van Rath. So for now, I'll hand you over to Henry from Van Rath for a few words before we get started. Thanks everyone for joining, and I hope you have a great session.
Ollie, thank you very much, Claire. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a delighted to be part of the series. And it's a real privilege for Van Rath to sponsor the event. So we're really looking forward to connecting over the next series as well. So it's obviously an interesting time for everyone. It's been a particularly challenging couple of years, and it's throwing out some interesting scenarios. So it's really nice to be part of this support network right across the membership. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the session today. And I'll pass you on to Angus. Thank you very much.
And Henry, thank you very much indeed. A very good afternoon to all of you. Thank you very much for inviting me. Hopefully everybody can see the slides on the screen. If you can't, do let us know in the chat box. Yeah, so my name, as the slide says, is Angus Farr. My background, I started off as a chartered accountant, a small, medium-sized firm, a little bit of tax, a little bit of corporate audit. I sort of stuck that for a few years post-qualification, and then sort of realised that I wasn't going to spend an entire career as an external auditor due to a very unfortunate allergy to adrenaline. So I took a bit of a sideways step into training and HR, and that is pretty much what I have been doing ever since. So yes, a chartered accountant and a chartered HR person to boot. So yes, I've been socially distancing for about 15 years with that combination of qualifications. And my main bag really is non-technical skills for technical professionals. I don't know if anyone's heard of the Peter Principle, probably my favorite management theory. And I know it's tragically sad, isn't it, to have to admit to having a favorite management theory, but the good old Peter Principle basically states that people in organizations rise to a level of incompetence and then stay there. Now, it doesn't apply to any of the organizations tuning in today because Karen and I checked beforehand, but it certainly applies to quite a few accountancy firms and law firms and actuarial practices that I come across. And it's just a reflection of the fact that if organizations place too much reliance on technical knowledge to determine career progression, then you can be storing up some problems, because you could be a superb sort of VAT specialist. You know everything there is to know about TOMs and everything, and if on the basis of that technical knowledge you're promoted to be a VAT manager, well, actually success as a manager there does rely on more than just technical knowledge. It does rely on your ability to manage yourself really well, which we're going to look at now. You need to be able to manage other people, and you need to be able to manage clients or stakeholders, whether those are internal or external. And of course, none of that is going to be within the professional qualification, and what's suggesting it should be. So it is just a reminder to us that these sort of non-technical skills are very important and often determine how far and how fast your career progresses, more than technical knowledge alone. Now, those of you who are students right now, of course, your focus is going to be on getting through the exams, and I absolutely understand that. But yeah, post-qualification, yeah, some of these softer skills really do kick in. So sessions like today, the one in a couple of weeks, and the series that Claire was talking about, yeah, always well worth to top up those skills. Okay, So in terms of what I'm going to cover over the next 35 minutes or so, yeah, I mean, from a personal effectiveness point of view, those of you working in practice will know, well, time is money in a more literal sense than for many organizations with charge out rates. So how we measure our productivity really does have that impact on the bottom line. Now, in a nutshell, a problem is that we spend so much time getting the urgent stuff done. And what we need to be getting better and better at is to get the important stuff done as well. But of course, we can spend a lot of time doing that. And indeed, we were just sort of chatting beforehand, swapping stories about how much time people spend at work. Indeed, what would be interesting actually in the little chat box, if you can just put in roughly what percentage of an average week do you feel as though you are at work, or thinking about work, or worrying about work. So take an average working week rather than an annual leave week. But just in the chat box, give me an idea. Broad percentage, to the nearest 5 or 10% is absolutely fine. But what proportion of an average week do you feel as though you are either at work, thinking about work, or indeed worrying about work? And I'll come back to that in a second. Now, in terms of time management, and I think time management does sit at the sort of heart of personal effectiveness, then as you move up, you realize that, yeah, your work does become characterized increasingly by sort of variety, reaction, and fragmentation. Now, variety is undoubtedly one of the really enjoyable things about life and work as a chartered accountant. There is a huge amount of variety. In an average week, you could be spending a bit of time talking to some internal stakeholders about what sort of reporting they need. You could be actually thinking about how to sort of interrogate the accounting system to produce a report that you want. You could be doing some one-to-one coaching with a junior member of staff. You could be, if you're working in practice, contributing to sort of some networking to actually win new business in. So there's a huge amount of variety, which I think on the whole is very motivational, and on the whole adds a lot of value to that organization. However, with that comes a lot of reaction. A lot of accountants I know spend a lot of time reacting to things. So we have an idea at the beginning of the week what we want to do, but very easily we are blown off course because we are reacting to things coming in, an email coming in, a phone call coming in, or somebody coming up to our desk saying, oh, look, could I just have a quick chat? And so there is a lot of reaction. And so it's no wonder that some people I know sort of think, oh, thank goodness it's 5:30. I can actually start doing some work now. Now, with that comes this idea of fragmentation, that because there is so much reaction, we really don't have much uninterrupted time. Our time in a week is very much fragmented. And I'm hoping you would all agree that if in your mind you're thinking, look, 3 hours and I could do a really good bit of tax advisory note to a client there, you need 3 hours. Well, I think we'd all agree that if we had 6 lots of half an hour, well, that doesn't quite add up to one lot of uninterrupted 3 hours. So managing interruptions, really important as well. Or indeed just the realization that this fragmentation means we have to be a lot more realistic about how much time we are going to need to get a task done, or indeed when we're managing expectations of managers or indeed clients about how long things will get done, given the reality of all of this sort of reaction. So some numbers for you. Some of you will probably recognize this number, 1,820. Well, I mean, one of the things that's working as an accountant, is we can quantify time available. Now, 1820 is those of you working in practice will probably know this is the number of chargeable hours in a year. So it is not unusual that some people at the top of organizations, and I was talking to a lawyer just before lockdown, actually, and she was managing near on 100 staff in her bit of a law firm. And she was saying, yeah, I mean, it's a bit more than a back of an envelope, but she'll do this calculation every year and think, right, over the next year, do I think we're going to get in 182,000 hours of chargeable work from clients. If I think we're going to get 190,000, 200,000, brilliant. We're at full capacity. We're going to be working a bit of overtime, but that's fine. If I can reasonably only foresee sort of 120,000 hours coming in, then who do I sack? As brutal as that, as brutal as that. Now, the other statistic, of course, is I mean, some brilliant results coming in here. So I've asked you, how much time do you feel as though you are working or at work or thinking about work or worrying about work? Got some great, Claire's up at 99% already. We've got the figures range that I've got here from 45%, gosh, part-timer Jack, up to 90% or 99%, so a huge range. Well, I mean, the reality, of course, is that you are being paid for less than 21% of your week. So if you look at a full fat week, 168 hours, yeah, if you're doing 35, 37 and a half hours, you're being paid for less than 21% of your week. So yeah, I mean, sometimes you need to ask yourself, gosh, what am I doing for 79%? Or rather, what would I like to be doing? Now, inevitably, we are going to be working more hours than we are strictly being paid for, because we enjoy working. We could be being paid for it. We know we're learning a lot from it. We are building a career. So I'm not saying, oh, as a result of this, you need to say, right, tools down, we're not going to work anymore. But yeah, trying to get that work-life balance is really good. And if you're interested in that and managing your stress levels, and don't forget, 8th of April, your session on stress management. So yeah, bear in mind, 21, 79%, make sure you're getting it the right way around. Now, when I ask people and say, oh, look, would an extra hour a week help you? Do you feel as though you'd be more productive? Invariably, they say absolutely, as long as they're not going to have to work that extra hour, but if they could become more efficient to free up an hour. And when you talk to people and say, well, what would you do with that extra hour? Invariably, it is something that is quite high level and value added. They say, well, I'd actually want to get some really good sort of forward planning done for this really awkward client in 6 months' time, or I'd really like to sit down with one of the junior members of staff and really help her to prepare the quarterly VAT return, or I'd really like to get involved in some sort of business development or recruitment within the practice or the business. So when people think about getting an extra hour, it is, again, often quite high added value and often very motivational. Now, finding an extra hour within your existing working time is only a 3% efficiency saving if you're looking at 35 or 37 and a half hours. So now I really don't mean to be glib by saying this. I think it is realistic to be just 3% more efficient as an individual. The difficulty is sort of ring fencing all of those 3% marginal gains in a week, sticking them together to create that uninterrupted 1 hour, and then actually doing what you've said you're going to do. That is the difficult bit, not just becoming that 3% more efficient. So what can we do? Now, if you've done any sort of time management training at all, you have probably seen this. This is the importance urgency grid, or any sort of keen military historians, you've probably seen this as the Eisenhower grid. Dwight D. Eisenhower is a complete time and motion nut. So this is this relationship between importance and urgency. And yeah, some people say, oh no, I sort of get into the office and it's a complete random selection of tasks that I end up doing. Well, it won't be random. It won't be random. We know enough about how the brain works and organizational psychology to know that we are sort of fairly regularly, not every second, but every sort of 10, 15 minutes, quickly recalibrating our mental to-do list and figuring out the relationship between its urgency and its importance. And that is what determines what we do in what order. So urgency has, I think, an absolute meaning here, because we can have things that are highly urgent and of low urgency. And I think we would all agree that something that is needed by 5 o'clock today is more urgent than something that is needed by the end of next week. And that is more urgent than something that is needed by the end of of June. So I think we have we all understand low urgency and high urgency. And I think urgency has a connotation with efficiency. I think some people are good at getting urgent stuff done. We may not like the fact that we are good at that, but we can juggle a lot of tasks. We are very busy. We have this sort of high throughput. It's that lovely quote, was it Lucille Ball, who said, if you want to get something done, give it to a busy person. So you have these people who are juggling furiously tasks. You throw in another task and poof, they'll just do it. It could be afterwards they sort of go, oh, you gave me more to do, as opposed to people who just sort of make themselves busy with two tasks, and you ask them to do exactly the same size task and they sort of go, no, I'm absolutely rushed off my feet here. So urgency, connotation with efficiency. Importance is more subjective than urgency, because I mean, so what is important to Zara is going to be different to what's important to Henry, and that's going to be different to what's important to Claire, and that's absolutely fine. And so we will have a slightly different way of interpreting low importance and high importance. The other thing, of course, is sometimes importance can be superimposed. So if the most senior person, if the FD or the senior partner asks you to do this sort of small VAT return, and you think, oh, blimey, I could, technically this is a very easy thing to do, but because it's somebody hierarchically important gives it to you, it therefore becomes highly important. So sometimes importance can be imposed. And I think if there's a connotation of urgency with efficiency, there's definitely a connotation of effectiveness with importance. So we've got this sort of cruciform relationship, low and high urgency, low and high importance. And of course, this then translates through into these four very generic categorizations of activities. That top right, these are the critical activities, very urgent, very important. All the way down, as you can see, those distractions, the sort of low importance, low urgency. Now, I mean, these are very, very broad categorizations here. But again, those of you who've done time management training, and I think most of us have, it's a very generic course. Of course, this then pushes through to those four strategies for how we should do this. So the top right, this is the do it. This is the sort of, look, house burning down, drop everything else. We've just got to do those high urgency, high importance things. Now, there is an extent, and this may be 1 or 2 years in the future for you in the top left, to what extent can you actually delegate work? So this could be the high urgency, but it's low importance to you, that is. So you need that work done, but it's not important to you. So can somebody else do that? Bottom left-hand corner, this is the sort of dump stuff. Should we be doing that at all? Now, again, I mean, it's more nuanced than that, because I think every so often doing a bit of procrastinating is okay. We know that we probably shouldn't spend too much time just sort of selecting which sort of tea bag we're going to have for our morning brew, but it's a bit of a distraction. So I think, but generally we need to be careful that we don't start doing stuff that is really low urgency, low importance. The crucial thing, and certainly for the next sort of 20 minutes or so, is this idea of diarising. These are the high importance but low urgency tasks. Now, when I talk to people, they'll normally say, oh, this is the sort of, preparing for somebody else's appraisal if they're a line manager, or if they're in practice, or I need to sort of make sure I hit that sort of billing deadline. So, or get involved with a tender, or indeed pick up the phone and just do some good sort of client relationship management. Pick up the phone to a client and say, look, how are you getting on? No, there's nothing urgent. I'm just interested. Keep those relationships going. We all know we should be doing those. We all know they're important, but they're very rarely urgent. Now, again, it would be too simplistic to say, well, because they're not urgent, they never get done. The bottom right tasks, they do get done, but only when it sort of creeps up into the high urgent. So if we are having to do appraisals of junior staff, we always think, oh, we know that's coming up and we should do it. It's important to do it. But then everything gets the better of us and we simply don't do it. So we will get it done when it becomes urgent. That's when HR is starting to bang on the door and say, look, the deadline was last Tuesday. And we're going, oh, blimmin' heck, right, let's get this done. So when we leave it till it becomes urgent, we probably don't do it quite as well as we could have done had we given ourselves more time. And indeed, certain tasks, they actually take longer to do when they've become urgent than they would have done had we done it earlier. So this is the crucial bit. This is the personal effectiveness bit. This is the, can we get that important stuff done as well as the urgent? Because all too easily, the urgent stuff just sort of crashes around and expands to time given. So, I mean, there is all sorts of sort of techniques out there, and it is always interesting what people do in terms of sort of to-do lists. Again, just in the chat box, if you have a to-do list, just quickly type in, is it daily or weekly or just sort of once every crisis? So a lot of people will have some sort of to-do list. Quite a few sort of daily, and so daily and weekly. Yeah, and I mean, there's no rule about this. And I think over lockdown, some people have said, actually, it has helped me because I have been a lot more rigid about doing a to-do list. And a long list of desirables. Yeah, I think that's me as well. These are the sort of aspirational things I really wish I could do. And it is interesting. I mean, again, those of you who have responded in here, also just put in whether you do this at the beginning of the day or week or the end of a day or week. And again, there is no right answer here, but some people do these daily. And they'll do them at the beginning of the day. They'll sit down and they will take a step back and think, right, what is it I need to get busy doing? There's always a danger if you don't have that period of reflection, whether it is at the beginning of the day, beginning of the week, or end of the day. The danger is we just start work, we switch on, we get this deluge of emails, and it's very easy to say, oh, I'll just answer these couple of emails and then I'll have a think about what I need to do. And then poof, we are down the rabbit hole already. And it's amazingly powerful, that gravitational pull. And it could be sort of mid-morning or late morning that we think, gosh, you know, I've just been reacting again. Yeah, so some people do them at the beginning of the day, some people do them at the end of the day. And of course, the benefit of doing them at the end of the day is, especially with working from home, people just want to have that sort of brain dump. And I think it's very interesting. I mean, it's certainly at the beginning of lockdown, people were sort of saying, oh, this is terrific. I don't have to commute. This is brilliant. And then certainly a year into lockdown, more and more people I was talking to were saying, actually, I miss my commute. Because that period of 20 minutes in the car or 30 minutes on the bus or whatever was just this opportunity to sort of almost depressurize between work and home. And it was almost either the way to work was this opportunity to sort of gear yourself up and think, right, what are the main things I need to do today or this week? And the time returning from work to home was this opportunity to sort of put issues to bed. But because there has been this great blurring, some people really struggle. And so some people at the end of the day will say, look, it's quite good because I can actually put things down on a list, and that's my sort of work worries dumped down there. Because it has got to the extent that certainly latterly, and again, probably you're going to cover this on the sort of stress and burnout session on the 8th, that people say, well, do you know, I don't really feel as though I'm working from home anymore, Angus. I feel as though I'm living at work. Because work has become such a huge manifestation of their house that they just, there is no gray between those. So having some sort of to-do list, I think, is good. And of course, there are apps out there as well, and they are great. I don't know if anyone is using an app, let us know in the chat box. I mean, I come across a lot of people using Amazing Marvin. They think that is great. Some people are using the list functions on phones, and again, it is just an opportunity that when things occur to them, if they're going to be out or at home, it is just, you just want to capture these ideas somewhere. comment here, too many lists, daily priorities, but then individual job assignments, sometimes beginning of day to set targets, priorities, but sometimes end of day. So I can download things. Exactly. Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. That is this idea, this sort of depressurization. Yeah, Claire, Microsoft To Do is great. So I think a lot of people have been making a lot more use of this. I mean, turning to technology, well, I'll tell you what, yeah, those of you in the mood for sharing here, just in the chat box, how many emails have you got in your inbox right now, read and unread, roughly? So if you want, just in the chat box, no naming, no shaming here, but there is usually a variety that comes out here. Some people sort of say, oh, 2 or 3 or 4. Some people, it's basically however many the server at work allows. But gosh, you've got a very exact answer there. So far the range is from 30 to over 37,000. So there we are. And so it is interesting, people's behavior and reaction to this. And some people are, and it's not necessarily the case that if you've got the fewest that you are the best, because some people have very few, but they say, oh, my problem is I don't like having email, so as soon as I see that little pop-up, I just jump on it, and then I can spend too much time answering emails. So some people are quite good, and they'll have a tolerance of allowing 50, 60 to build up so they can be busy elsewhere, and then they will fill it through them. So again, this idea of fragmentation, that it is almost better to sort of push through a bunch of emails rather than to keep interrupting our workflow to go and answer one email. So I mean, quick solutions there are certainly try and switch off that little auto pop-up notification when it comes through. Indeed, I was talking, well, I'm talking to more people actually who've said one of the benefits of working from home is I will switch Outlook off when I'm working. And it is amazing. I don't know if anyone here would say that they have switched Outlook off to sort of increase their personal productivity. But when you mention it to people, you might as well be suggesting that you sort of switch off sort of a heart monitor in a children's hospital. And yeah, I mean, for some people, it can work. And I know one lady recently was saying she will switch Outlook on 3 times a day. Now, when she explained, time one was sort of 8:30 till 10:30, and then 12 till 2, and then 4 till 6. Actually, Outlook is on for more often than it's off, but in her mind, she's saying, I only switch Outlook on 3 times. So the default in her mind is it is off. And I think we've got to be realistic about how quickly stakeholders or clients expect a response from us. And actually, in a couple of hours' time is fine, rather than immediate. And so if you want to remove that distraction, switch off the email, or at least switch off that sort of pop-up notification. Calendars, a lot of people indeed, instead of doing a to-do list, they're very good at using their calendar, flagging with the urgent stuff. And I think some people will either use their email system as a to-do list, so they will send emails to themselves when something occurs to them, so they've always got it in their box, or they will be putting things into their calendar. I would certainly say that it is never too soon to start taking charge of your own calendar, because if you don't put your own stuff in there, even if it is your time saying, right, this 3 hours I'm reviewing files. Now, if you put it in there, at the very least, it is a reminder to you that, look, this is 3 hours work that you need to do. It might be true to say that somebody might look in your calendar and say, oh, I'm not going to interrupt Ahmad because he's put 3 hours reviewing files. I don't think that happens all the time. I think a lot of the time people are just going to put stuff into your calendar regardless. I think some people don't even look in calendars before they sort of parachute in an appointment. But it is a reminder to you, and it may just be a reminder to other people that you want to get stuff done. But don't be afraid of putting your own stuff into calendar. And I keep talking about Outlook. Other packages are available. The danger, if you don't, the danger is that at some point you will realize that your calendar becomes the dumping ground for everybody else's to-do list. And then you are going from one thing to another, to another, to another, not of your making. And you are going to find it really difficult to be productive there. There are also a huge range of other collaboration tools out there. I don't know, is anyone using Slack or anything like that? Or WhatsApp. These are used at sort of departmental or team level. Gosh, I was even reading a report the other day, astonishing. Was it Boris Johnson get some government documents over his sort of WhatsApp account? So that really taking it to an extreme. But certainly some groups in organizations will have another way of staying in touch with us. But overall, yeah, be open to learning new stuff as well, whether it is finessing your sort of Outlook skills. And I was talking to somebody recently about they said, oh no, I make appointments for myself, so every so often an email will come in, so I'll open up an Outlook calendar invite and write in the calendar invite a summary of the email to remind myself. And I said, well, didn't you know you can just click on that email, drag it down to the sort of bottom left until you're hovering over the calendar icon, unclick, and then up will pop an Outlook invite with the text of the email already in it. So all you've got to do is just identify time. And he was going, oh, amazing. That's terrific. So, I mean, it may be just finesse your skills. There's also one of the buttons in Outlook, which is focus time. And so it will suppress other notifications. Now you need to check this, because some employers, you need to get behind your admin access to tweak that. But certainly switching off the notifications, you should be able to do that yourself without going through admin access. So some of the new stuff may be technology and just better understanding the sort of productivity tools you've already got. It might be softer stuff. I mean, I'm coming across more and more people who have done sort of speed reading. I don't know if anyone has done a speed reading course recently, but they're brilliant. I remember doing one sort of good 10 years ago and easily doubled my reading speed in the course of sort of a 3-hour workshop, easily doubled it. And so if you have to read a lot, then yeah, if you can double your reading speed, you can read the same amount in half the time, or you can read twice as much through the SORP or the accounting standard as you used to do. So do be open to learning new stuff. And I'd say, yes, certainly be observant of other people. Who do you work with who you think is productive? What is it they're actually doing? Is it to do with a to-do list or some aspect of technology? Now, the other aspect to this, of course, is interruptions. Now, I think interruptions can get a bit of a bad rep, really, because we often think of interruptions as being a bad thing. I do think it is more nuanced than that. I think if you are sort of supervising anybody, then yeah, we want to be interrupted. If we are giving some instructions to sort of a new trainee, then we want to reassure Pamela that if she gets stuck, she's got to tell us. And that's fine. We want to be interrupted, especially if the instructions we have given downwards are unclear, because we want to sort of unblock that really quickly. Some of the time, though, yeah, interruptions are bad because they stop our flow. Now, just to sort of illustrate this, let's just have this, and this is very broad, so forgive the sort of ugliness of this, but this is sort of this relationship between time and productivity. And I think if we say, right, we are going to spend 30 minutes on a particular task, I think we realize that we're not going to be at 100% productivity for all of those 30 minutes. There is going to be an element of warm-up time. So this could be, right, we need to get this return done. We need to get this section of the audit file done. So, right, we've got to log in. We've got to find that section. We perhaps just need to sort of review the notes we left last time, or just review what other people have done. Then we can start being productive. But there is that element of 5-minute warm-up time. Now, I'm not going to argue whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 3 minutes. There is going to be an element, this sort of takeoff phase. Then at the end, there is going to be this warm down. So that could be, right, let's just stop this. Let's just tick that. Let's review that. Let's put that sort of progress note in. Right, let's save this. Let's log out of that, shut it down. So we're not being 100% productive, but we are sort of closing things down. Now, if we are going to have 5 minutes at either end, we've got 20 minutes of full productivity in that 30. Now, extending the time at the bottom to 60 minutes. Now, surprise, surprise, we're still going to have substantially a similar warm up and a similar warm down time. Let's call it 5 minutes still. But what has happened, of course, is in the course of those 60 minutes, we've now got 50 minutes at 100% productivity. So although the total amount of time we're spending on a task doubles, the 100% productivity time more than doubles. And again, I mean, the maths here isn't that complicated, and you're probably sort of skipping along to that as I was saying it. So the point I'm making here is we want to try and maximize this high productivity, because that's where we are going to be at the most value. And as your career progresses, certainly those in practice, your charge out rate goes up. So it is really important that we are delivering value as much as possible. So this is why getting uninterrupted time is great, because what an interruption does is it really sort of knocks this for six. Because what you'll find is you will get into a task, so there'll be this sort of 5-minute warm up. You are then at your sort of cruising altitude of 100% productivity, and then right, we get a call coming in from Gary there, and right, that bang, that is something. Or Gary comes up to your desk, says, "Oh look, Angus, can I just get your input on something?" So that is this moment of interruption. Now, there is no sort of easy descent here. It's a bit of a crash. It's almost, I've got to take the file and put it to one side and go, "Yeah, Gary, how can I help you?" Then I need to spend the time dealing with that query. And so that's this sort of bit at the bottom. We don't know how long it could be. It could be 2 minutes. It could be 5 minutes. It could be a day. Then we have to get back in to dealing with our task. Now, this is the sort of insidious bit. This is what can be called rebound or recoil time. So it is this idea of, it is the time it takes you to resume the level of productivity you were at from before you got interrupted. I don't know if that makes sense to you. So you've almost, if we get interrupted, we've almost got to flick back a couple of pages to recap ourselves before we can start going forwards again. Now, I mean, there's not much research on recoil or rebound time, but that is out there. I mean, I've read estimates that it is between 3 and 7 minutes in a sort of a professional environment. This is the amount of time it takes our brain to just remind itself, where had it got to last time? Now, even if it's, let's say, 3 minutes, what that means is if you get interrupted sort of 20 times in a week, some of you may be thinking 20 times a day, more like Angus. Well, I mean, even 20 times a week, that's 1 hour. Poof, gone, evaporated. Now, I'm not saying that is 1 hour gone dealing with interruptions. I'm saying that is 1 hour gone dealing with the effect of interruptions. I mean, dealing with the interruptions could be a lot longer. And again, I'm not saying all interruptions are bad, but any interruption, we've got the time it takes to deal with the interruption and this recoil or rebound time. And although they may sound short, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, the effect over a day, a week, a month can be significant. So how we actually manage interruptions is important. I mean, if that makes sense as a concept, great. Do let us know in the chat box. So what can we do? Well, I mean, it's many and varied. I think about timings. So I think one of the great things with hybrid working that a lot of organizations are sort of pivoting to now is this opportunity to say, right, well, if I'm expected in the office 2 or 3 days a week and can work at home 2 or 3 days a week, right, what are the things that best lend themselves to working from home. Now, this is broad brush, but more often than not, when I talk to people, they say, actually, working from home, I can be more productive. There are fewer interruptions. You will still get some phone calls, you will still get some emails, but hopefully there are fewer people just walking up to your desk at home, unless people are really, really keen for a bit of your time. So that source of interruption goes. And I think if you manage your diary and you're making it clear when you're in the office, then yeah, you'll get that uninterrupted time at home. And so I think where you've got this sort of, you need half a day to sort of write a good accounting policy or review a file, then yeah, that uninterrupted time is going to be good, because you are going to be able to get to that cruising altitude and work really well. And I know people talk about this sort of 45-minute attention span, and to an extent that's right. Although, I mean, if you're interested, there's Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who's written a lot about sort of getting into the flow, getting into the zone, and you can survive a good couple of hours if you're really absorbed by something. I wouldn't say time flies, but yeah, you are in it. You feel that you are making progress, and I think you can add a lot of value. So do think about timings. Now, more than that, people will say, look, I try and manage expectations of when I can be interrupted, even if I'm in the office 5 days a week. I was actually talking to somebody, was it just before Christmas, I think, and she was saying what she does in her diary now is she I think there's 4 or 5 people she works with, and they will all interrupt her whenever they need a bit of help. So the 2 things she's done is, with junior staff, she'll always give them 2 things to do. So she'll brief them on task A, that's what I want you to do, and if you get stuck, can you start task B? So very junior staff, as soon as it gets stuck, it's a hard halt, that they need help, but if you give them another task to do, that might allow them to start something else before coming to you. The other thing, of course, is she'll say, look, in my diary, I'm going to put, I think it was Wednesday afternoons, dealing with staff queries. So every Wednesday afternoon, Paula is dealing with staff queries. Now, and she'll tell people, look, if you don't understand something, of course, come and ask for help. My door is open. But if it can wait, Wednesday afternoons are where I'm doing nothing but dealing with your queries. And so she said she said it took a good 6 months or so to start corralling interruptions from the rest of the week to Wednesday afternoons. Of course, there's still going to be some interruptions outside of those times. But if she can spend a Wednesday afternoon dealing with interruption, followed by interruption, followed by interruption, followed by interruption, then that is really going to free up a lot of the time elsewhere to be much more productive. And she said even now she's never dealing solidly with queries on Wednesday afternoons, so it's always a bit of a bonus time when she can actually get half an hour done. So don't be afraid of managing expectations about timing. Now, I'm not suggesting that you now go back to your teams and say, look, I can only be interrupted on Wednesday afternoons, but it's fine to say to people, look, if it's urgent, come and find me, but actually after 12 noon is better, or look, after 10 a.m. is better, or ideally not after 4 p.m. because that's when I need to do my sort of stepping back and to-do list for the following week. So don't be afraid of managing expectations of when people can come and see you. Thinking about environment, and again, I think the move to hybrid working, a lot of people are sort of going into sort of hot desk environments. Some people say that can make productivity better because nobody actually knows where you are necessarily, so you can be a bit hidden. Some people say that it is even worse because you're suddenly in the office and everybody wants to have a chat, and if you haven't seen each other, and it's inevitable, teams coming back for the first time, there's almost sort of 2 years worth of accrued small talk that needs to be got through. And actually a practical point, if you are managing other people, you tend to find that actually you need people at sort of senior supervisor level to be in every day of the week, because you're going to have a lot of these new trainees asking questions. So do think about working environment, think about body language. I know some people will sort of, if somebody comes up and says, oh, look, can I have a chat? They will stand up themselves. And the effect of that is people, oh, right, okay, I can see you're off. I'll go elsewhere. I think my favorite one was, it was at a tax supervisor, and she said people would always interrupt her and they're basically wanting free tax advice. So what she starts to do now is somebody comes up and says, oh, look, Josephine, could I just ask you a VAT question? She'll go, oh, absolutely. Sorry, what's the client code? So she wants the client code up front. And if they say, oh, don't worry, it's not that important, then fine, they can go away and find it out themselves. But anyway, and technology, as we've seen already, do use technology. I know some firms are very good and some organizations are very good. They will sort of encourage staff to record a message every day. You don't have to be out of the office to record a message. Say, look, I am in the office, but in a series of meetings, I will reply within 24 hours, or if it's urgent, please press 3 to speak to Chloe or whoever. So do use technology to try and fend off, for a limited amount of time, these interruptions, because if you can't do that, you are very likely to start getting completely subsumed by the urgent stuff and not get any of the important stuff done. Blimey, right, that was a very, very quick whiz through. Claire, I don't know if we have got any questions, but I'll hand back to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Angus. That drag and drop from an email into the diary, that might just change my life.
Wow, okay.
I gave it a go there, and I did not know that you could do that. So I'm one of those people who retypes into the Outlook, what I need to do. So
okay,
that's actually a really, really useful tip.
But it is often these really small things. And I know very quickly in working life, we sort of get to know the technology. And so we will switch off that little sort of paperclip that comes up because it is very annoying. But I think when working context has changed so much, it can sometimes be worth switching it back on to see, actually, are there tools I need to know now that would be useful that weren't useful before?
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. I don't know if anybody has any questions and they want to either drop it into the chat or into the Q&A function, and we can get Angus to answer some of those for us. But I suppose, Angus, from my point of view, the hybrid working, obviously it's a big change to everybody's routine. How do you manage others as well as ourselves in that situation? What's your top tips for that?
I think managing others, I mean, I think certainly with hybrid working, I mean, we've been focusing on how you manage yourself, but in managing others, I think it throws up some challenges, but it also throws up some opportunities, Claire. I think some of the challenges that I've been coming across are people who, especially very junior staff, they've almost got so comfortable working from home. It's becoming a bit of a challenge to sort of coax them out and sort of say, look, it'd be good if you came into the office. It'd be good if you could come out to a client. I think giving instructions, delegating, you still need to be able to do that remotely. You still need to manage performance, and I think this is a perennial difficulty that a lot of sort of people, and you don't have to be a line manager, but dealing with poor performance, having those tricky conversations, they are still things that a lot of people find difficult. They're either unwilling or unable to do that. Now, I think technology, though, does present some amazing opportunities. So I'm hearing more. Well, there's a couple of clients, and they've really got this licked now. When they're giving instructions over Teams, for instance, and they're saying, right, I wanted to talk you through this sort of work on receivables I want you to do. They will say, I'll just hit the record button now, as we aren't doing right now. And so that sort of 4 or 5 minute instruction giving is then recorded. So little Bertie can go away and listen again to that. And actually, in reality, it's almost the second time we hear it that we then come up with meaningful questions. And I know one organization, they are building up this little library of sort of 3, 4, 5 minute instruction givings and encouraging new trainees to just rattle through all of those in the first week or two. I mean, you're not going to win an award for podcasting or anything, but you are using technology to capture that instruction giving. And anecdotally, they're saying it does mean that people are going away and doing what we're wanting them to do. We're not having to check up on them as much. So I think, swings and roundabouts, that remoteness does throw up some challenges, but I think the technology can be quite helpful in that respect. Very, very happy to hear anybody else's views on that, though.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really, really good idea, Angus. As you say, sometimes the same instructions you give over and over again, and recording that might actually save you time, and it means that that person can watch it in their own time too, as when it suits them as well. So no, I think that's a really good practical tip. We have some like newly qualified or actually people who are still studying for their exams on the call. does the hybrid working throw up any particular issues for those sorts of trainees, as opposed to maybe the more young professionals and people who have qualified?
I mean, I think it does. I mean, we were talking just before we sort of hit the record button on the difficulties of sort of studying, and I think it is the same thing as it was pre-COVID. That you've got the balance of sort of trying to get your studies done, trying to do a day's work, and trying to retain some vestige of a social life. And I think what has happened the last 2 years has really crunched those. I think it is a real shame that a lot of people doing a qualification have been deprived of some of the sort of really useful opportunity to put things into practice, to learn by doing. Now, I've got to be careful. I mean, I think everything that is in the professional exam syllabi is absolutely fantastic, but I think even the institute people joining us would agree that actually having an opportunity to put this into practice and just observing other people doing things is great, and just listening. I think if you're in an office, it is just absorbing what you hear going on, and even flipping that around. Claire, I was talking to a supervisor or an AM recently, and she was saying the thing that she had missed the most from the last 2 years is she couldn't hear her team anymore. And she was saying it wasn't that she was intentionally eavesdropping, but she worked in such a sort of a close physical proximity that pre-lockdown she could pick up whether somebody was stuck or whether they'd run out of work or something else, and she just couldn't hear that. So she'd found it very, very difficult. And I think anecdotally, some managers have said the difficulty is knowing who is stuck out there, who are the junior members of staff who need some help. Almost going back to what we're saying with time management, that we can spend so much time responding to the queries that are coming in, we sometimes forget to think, well, who isn't asking me a question? Who might be struggling? Who might be suffering in silence? And so, yeah, I think it adds an additional layer, that because we haven't had direct physical line of sight onto some trainees, it has been difficult for us to intervene, to say, look, can I help you? Or don't worry, people find this difficult. And I also think that, certainly back in my day, but I realize I'm ancient here, but yeah, I mean, if you're working with sort of half a dozen or so other trainees, if they're in the same room, if you hit a problem, you would probably more often reach out to them before you asked upwards. And so I think with some trainees, they just haven't had that sort of esprit de corps. So it has just reduced it. So I think it is good bringing people back into the office and connecting them up with their colleagues, because I mean, your colleagues are going to be a very important, not just a business network for future, but a social network and a learning network. So I think as seniors managers, those of us who aren't going through the exams, we just need to be aware of that and think, right, to what extent can we create that or recreate that for junior staff? So it's a very long-winded answer, Claire.
Very, very useful. No, and I'm sure everybody will find that answer really useful. So thank you, Angus. Another question just here. Is it possible to identify a bottom line impact of not being personally productive?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's been a lot of research done onto all this soft skill stuff. Does it really have an impact on the bottom line? And yeah, it does. It does. I mean, I think in the first case that there is good old Parkinson's law of business, which states that work expands to time given. Now, it's often sort of thrown out there as saying, oh, look, if you're going to give sort of first year trainee RMAD a 2-hour VAT return to do, and you give it to him at sort of 2 p.m. on a Friday afternoon, when will he finish it? I mean, some people will say, oh, 4:30, 5 o'clock. I mean, occasionally when you ask that, some people go, oh, Monday lunchtime, if you're lucky, kind of thing, which is rather cruel. But there is this idea that, yeah, work can expand to time given. So I think you've just got to be careful that you don't fall into that trap, or indeed that people around you don't do that, because then that is money on the clock, and you can very easily identify the effect on a recovery rate in a practice environment of that. Those of you who've come across David Meister, I mean, he writes a lot. I mean, he's a UK accountant. He does a lot of work in the US. He talks about grade drift, and so this is the idea that in most firms, and I think he says a quarter or a third of work is just done at the wrong level. So you are doing work that could and should have been done by somebody below you. They are probably doing work that could and should have been done there. So all of that, if you plot that out onto a traditional recovery rate calculation, and again, that might not be as relevant to people outside of practice, but you can quickly identify impact on recovery rate. And I know the connection between recovery rate and profitability isn't necessarily direct line, but I absolutely believe that, yes, how we manage ourselves and how we manage other people really will have that impact on the bottom line. And I mean, a completely different webinar is this sort of, we as managers, even with a small m, we've got to be pushing work down and away, very much so.
Okay. Any other questions into the chat box or into the Q&A?
Yeah, if anyone has any other questions or comments or wants to share what sort of personal effectiveness app they use, or how many emails they have got, then please do so. But I think it's always interesting, this range of emails. And no, some people are very good at sort of, no, I like to have a very clean sort of inbox. I mean, some people have never even realized that the inbox has a scroll bar, and there's a number of others of us who are just very used to seeing that scroll bar disappear very rapidly to the top right hand corner. One thing I would say with sort of application of technology, and we're moving a little bit off, but I mean, if we're encompassing sort of communication skills here, is with proofreading. And I think we always know it's good to sort of proofread before we send something out. And it's notoriously difficult to proofread your own work because your brain is basically reading what it thinks it's written rather than what it's actually written. There are sort of half a dozen or so tricks and tips that you can do to sort of disrupt that familiarity. But I would say one of the things is in technology, in Outlook and Word, is the read aloud button is brilliant. So if you haven't come across it, it'll be in that ribbon at the top. But what happens is your computer reads to you what you've just written, and especially for an email, I mean, when you hear it, it's a bit of an odd computer voice. So you're not going to spot any spelling mistakes from it, but you are going to hear it very much how your client will. And so stylistically, it will make a difference. And people have said, actually, it's brilliant. And I'd never used the button before because we're in an office environment and we've either had our sound cards removed or we've been told we can't make a noise. But now, I think if you're working from home, it is much easier to do that. And I think every office I've ever been in the last sort of 2 months, people are absolutely fine with people wearing headsets. It's completely turned around any sort of no headset policy in some organizations. So yeah, I think the technology can help. And if you're including sort of communication skills in personal effectiveness, then yeah.
That's good. I see a questions come in just there on technology, actually. What's your advice about using a work phone? That's an interesting one, Angus.
Yeah. In terms of a work phone, it is interesting whether, well, just in the chat box, give us a yes if you do have a work phone with emails coming in, or a no if you don't have a work phone with emails coming in. Because some people say, oh, when they got the job, it's lovely. The firm gives us a nice sort of posh phone with emails. And people recently were saying, I hate the fact that I have got this phone. Right, there we are. So somebody's saying no through choice. God damn it, I don't want. Absolutely. Exactly. So Kelly's saying, yes, bad habit, checking emails before going to bed. And this is the division here. This is really interesting because some people say, oh, it's lovely to have a phone because can be contactable, and genuinely I could be dropping the kids off, I could be sort of shopping for a scuba diving kit in middle of Lidl or whatever you want to be doing, and you can stay in touch. Other people, probably very much along Kelly's lines, are saying, I don't want it because it will invade my time. And I find myself looking at the screen too much. So it's an interesting question, and it really does divide people as to whether it is a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, a bigger debate is this thing with presenteeism, and it used to be back in the day with my HR hat on, our sort of conversations were about absenteeism and are people working as much as they shouldn't, and are people pulling sickies. Then, of course, it went to presenteeism, where are people in the office too long? And lockdown came, and a lot of people initially said, oh, this is great, lockdown, because presenteeism is dead now because people aren't coming into the office. But latterly, people have been saying, well, actually, because of this technology, presenteeism is alive and well. And it is interesting talking to people as to say, look, if an email does come in at 6 p.m., 7 p.m., is there an expectation that you will have read it and responded to it before open of business the following day? And some people say, oh no, yeah, there is that expectation, or some partners will send it and they certainly expect you to respond. And so we're back into presenteeism. So some people do sort of labor under this always on, that there is an expectation that because we have given you this phone, because we have given you, or you're allowed to reclaim the cost of broadband, we therefore expect you to be responding. I don't think any organization explicitly says that, but culturally, implicitly, there can be an expectation. Whole different session that is, Claire, but it's an interesting one. So very good question. So thank you for asking that.
Yeah, I think we have just hit time there, Angus, but I just wanted
we wouldn't want to overrun
so
on a time management session, would we?
No, that might be a bad move. But Angus, thank you so much. That was a really practical session. I know myself, I've taken away lots of tips that I've written down and jotted down in my notebook to really put into practice going forward. Thank you again to Van Rath for sponsoring this session, and thank you all for joining. I hope to see you at our next webinar, which Angus has mentioned and I mentioned at the start. It's about managing stress and burnout as a young professional or as a student. It's going to be on Friday the 8th of April at 12:30 again, so please have a look out for that invite and register if you can. Thank you again, Angus. Thank you, everyone, and have a great weekend.